It will be yours. It will be yours.
Hello, everyone. I am Tara Godin, and I am the director of Montgomery County's Department of Health and Human Services. And it is my honor to welcome you to the second week of our Montgomery County Black History Month celebration. In response to this year's National Black History Month theme of the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity, we are focusing on the Black family in the context and lens of education, criminal justice, parenting and family, and the faith community. This week, we are focusing on criminal justice. So, why are we focusing on criminal justice? Well, although slavery was abolished during the Civil War, the criminal justice system in America has a long history of being used as a tool of oppression, repression, and aggression against our Black communities and our Black families. Discriminatory criminal justice policies and practices have historically and unjustifiably targeted Black people since the Reconstruction era, which is the period in American history immediately following the American Civil War. These discriminatory practices included the establishment of Black codes, which were restrictive laws designed to limit the freedom of African Americans and ensure their availability as cheap labor. Under Black codes, many states required Black people to sign yearly labor contracts, which basically equated to them being indentured servants. And if they refused these contracts, they risked being arrested, fined, and forced into unpaid labor. And sometimes even their children were taken away from them and they were forced into unpaid labor. And vagrancy laws. Vagrancy laws were passed that forced into labor anyone who appeared to be unemployed or homeless or who were doing things like walking without a purpose or walking at night or appearing to have a suspicious character. Now, if these so-called vagrants ran away and were recaptured, they would be forced to work for no compensation at all and forced to wear chains. These laws directly targeted newly freed Black slaves, criminalizing them for simply trying to rebuild their lives, who often traveled in search of work and in search of to be reunited with family members who were displaced or dispersed. Now, this targeted oppression by our country's criminal justice system continues today through racist policies and practices that continue to harm Black communities, that continue to harm Black families. According to the Bureau of Justice, 1 in every 15 African American men are incarcerated in comparison to 1 in every 106 white men. And African American women are 3 times more likely than white women to be incarcerated. While African Americans make up about 30% of the United States population, they account for 60% of those imprisoned. African Americans are also sentenced to death at significantly higher rates than their white counterparts. A report by the Department of Justice found that African Americans were approximately 3 times more likely to be searched during a traffic stop than white motorists, and almost 4 times as likely to experience the use of force during encounters with police. A report by the Human Rights Watch states that although studies show that African Americans are no more likely to use or sell illegal drugs than whites, African Americans are arrested at higher rates. According to U.S. Sentencing Commission, once convicted, African Americans receive sentences that are 10% longer than white offenders for the same crimes. And the Sentencing Project reports that African Americans are 21% more likely to receive mandatory minimum sentences than white defendants, and are 20% 30% more likely to be sentenced to prison for the same offense. But our current criminal justice system does not just target African American adults. In the United States, the school to prison pipeline is the disproportionate tendency of African American children and youth to become involved in the juvenile justice system and or incarcerated because of increasingly harsh school policies. According to recent data by the Department of Education, African American students are suspended, expelled, or arrested 3 times more often than their white classmates. And African American students suspended or expelled are 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system the following year. Near the end of his high school sophomore year, the 15-year-old honors English student, Antoine Rose Jr., wrote a poem expressing fear, conflict, and uncertainty about his future as a young Black man and the world around him. The poem, "I Am Not What You Think." I am confused and afraid. I wonder what path I will take. I hear that there's only 2 ways out. I see mothers bury their sons. I want my mom to never feel that pain. I am confused and afraid. I pretend all is fine. I feel like I'm suffocating. I touch nothing, so I believe all is fine. I worry that it isn't though. I cry no more. I am confused and afraid. I understand people believe I'm just a statistic, but I say to them, I'm different. I dream of life getting easier. I try my best to make my dream true. I hope that it does. I am confused and afraid. As many of you know, 2 years after this was written, Antoine, who was unarmed, was shot in the back and killed by Pittsburgh police as he fled the scene when a car he was a passenger in was pulled over during a police investigation. The disparities present in the criminal justice system undercut the very life potential of our Black people and our Black communities, where our Black families are way too often the collateral damage. Eliminating the disparities, the racial disparities inherent to our criminal justice system and the policies and practices must be a part of a renewed, refocused, and re-energized movement for racial justice in America. Amidst this dire situation, conversations that we are having today are lifting the veil as we work to find ways to lend our voices and our actions to this struggle. So we are so honored that each and every one of you have joined us today, because it will take all of us together to build a changed world. Now I'm going to turn it over to one of our most courageous voices, our moderator for today, Nia Coxum.
Thanks, Tara. Thank you for today's welcome and also for sharing that poem. So typically when we celebrate in person, we always begin the program with the Black National Anthem. So that is what we will hear next before we hear from Commissioner Lawrence. Attendees, you guys can feel free to sing along, but please keep yourselves on mute.
Every voice and sing, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the let it be. march on till victory is
All right, sorry for the sound issue, guys. I wasn't sure if it was just me, but it seemed like everyone else kind of had the distorted audio as well with the video. Next, we will hear from Commissioner Lawrence.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nia. Am I the only one who felt that Nia was looking directly at them when she said, please mute before you sing? I felt that she just looked at me, but I think I could have done better than that audio there. So it's all good. Wow, I'm thrilled to see 75 people here today. This is always one of my favorite county events. And as I'm sitting here reflecting, it was probably one of the last major county events I attended last year before the pandemic fully came aboard. It was March 7th that we had our first 2 cases. So I remember this event last year. I want to thank the committee for making sure that this event went on this year virtually. I think it's hugely important. And I actually like the idea of going across the whole month now. Instead of just having the one day. So I want to thank Tara for her leadership, all the members of the committee for each year who put this together. And I know that this has been going on for over a decade now. I've been a commissioner for 4 years now, but I know this has gone on long before I was here and will hopefully continue long after I am gone as well. I love the themes for this year: the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. And today's panel topic of criminal justice is so tremendously important in our community. So you'll be formally introduced, but I actually know all of the panel members very well, so I have to shout them out. First, the Honorable Greg Scott, who I've literally known since he was in high school, which makes me feel very old, but the first Black district judge here in Montgomery County, and I believe the youngest as well. And then Norristown Police Chief Mark Talbott, Norristown Councilwoman and Director of the Bail Fund, Heather Lewis, my friend, who has taught me a lot and educated me a lot on these issues. And then Nicole Phillips, a lawyer from Montgomery McCracken, who I've also know very well and have a lot of respect for. You know, as you all know, 2020 was a tough year. 2020 was a tough year because of COVID-19. 2020 was a tough year because of the social justice issues that came about in elections. So, you know, I'm glad to be in 2021, but it hasn't gotten all that much better so far. You know, I am the first African-American commissioner in Montgomery County history, and didn't know that until I was appointed back in 2017. And then people started to ask me what that meant. And I said, I've been Black my whole life, so it doesn't really feel that different. But now, you know, I know it's not important that I'm the first, it's important that I'm not the last. You know, Montgomery County is a great place to live. And I've been blessed by living here in Montgomery County, but we do have disparities here in this county. And as a commissioner, I've tried to speak about some of them. It's great to talk about all the good things, but we need to talk about the tough things as well. And COVID-19 was a perfect example of that. We knew that there were disparities before COVID-19. Okay, and if your life was hard before COVID-19, it didn't get easier as a result of it. It got worse. You know, we have 21 school districts here in Montgomery County. When the schools were closed March a year ago, many of our school districts transitioned over to virtual learning fairly quickly. 3 of our school districts with a large majority, a minority and African-American students had to figure out how to feed their kids. Literally had to figure out how to feed their kids. They weren't looking for Chromebooks. They weren't trying to get lesson plans home. They were trying to figure out how the children in those schools were going to get the 2 meals a day that they got there. It's not right. You know, we're the second wealthiest county. We like to say that. But we have poverty here. And that poverty hits our African-American community harder than it hits other communities, our Latino community as well. I am not a lawyer, so I did not have a lot of experience with the criminal justice system prior to becoming a commissioner. I had not been in court, and luckily I had not gone. We have disparities there, where some would say, well, that's the district attorney's role or that's the judge's roles. The commissioners have the power to budget, and we have the power to appropriate. And that's why, I'm proud that, we had three offices that are growing this year: Office of Public Health for obvious reasons, voter services to handle the new mail-in voting, but then that we are creating a pretrial services unit here in Montgomery County we have not presently had. We have people who are in jail, not because of the crime they committed. They haven't been convicted of a crime. They're there because they can't afford the bail. Other counties have done this. Montgomery County is bringing it up, but I'm proud that we are going to have a pretrial services program, because I've learned of what happens then when you can't get out of jail, losing your job, losing your home, losing your family, and you haven't been convicted of a crime. You haven't been convicted of a crime. And where we have a system where it's innocent until proven guilty. We can't have people sitting in jail before they have been convicted or who may never be convicted. So, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm committed to this work. I want to be held accountable for it. I see people on here who have educated me and taught me and challenged me. And I ask you to continue to do that. We're not going to fix everything overnight. We're not going to fix everything in a month, but the time has come that we need to make a serious effort and have serious conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community around all of these issues. So with that, I'm going to stop, but I do have to acknowledge a couple of people and that I can see or hear, and I'm sorry for anyone that I missed, but our treasurer, Jason Salas, is on. I see Councilwoman Sonia Saunders, my friend, is on as well. Councilman Hakeem Jones, I mentioned Councilwoman Heather Lewis, and then Barbara O'Malley, our Deputy COO, is on as well, and Greg Nestor, our Chief Public Defender. If I missed anyone, I'm sorry, but they only gave me a little bit of time here. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to Nia. If you want me to sing, Nia, though, if you want me to do lift every voice, I could do a verse of that, maybe.
It's okay. I think the video is enough.
Okay, yeah, we don't want anyone else to drop off with me singing. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to hearing some of the program as well.
Thanks for joining us, Commissioner Lawrence, and also for your remarks. So next, I will begin to introduce our criminal justice panelists before we get started with questions. So our first panelist is Chief Mark Talbott Sr. He was appointed to the position of Chief of Police for the Norristown Police Department on November 18th, 2013. Chief Talbott has over 25 years of law enforcement experience. Prior to being appointed as the Chief of Norristown, Chief Talbott served as the Director of the Bureau of Enforcement Investigation with the Pennsylvania Department of State. Our second panelist is Nicole Phillips. She's a resident of Montgomery County who has spent her career as an advocate in the courtroom, a servant in her community, and as a mentor to young people. She has spent the majority of her nearly 20-year career as a prosecutor representing the victims of southeastern Pennsylvania in complex criminal matters such as robberies, rape and assault, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, and white-collar crime. She began her career as an assistant district attorney and has tried hundreds of jury and bench trials in local and federal courts. While serving as an assistant United States attorney, Nicole participated in the Supervision to Aid Reentry Court, which provides a range of services to assist individuals in successfully returning to the community after serving federal sentences. Currently, she is a partner at Montgomery, McCracken, Walker & Rhodes, LLP, where she is a member of the litigation department focusing on white-collar criminal defense, internal investigations, and civil litigation. Next, we have Heather Lewis, who is a councilwoman and a nonprofit professional who has been a resident of Norristown for over 15 years. Her 11-year nonprofit career includes working with victims of domestic violence, homelessness, and fair housing laws. As a nonprofit professional, Heather has been committed to the needs of vulnerable individuals and families, encouraging career training, education, and the benefits of home ownership. As the Director of Resource Development for a local nonprofit, Heather has expertise in fund development, information and referral resources, and extensive relationships with partners interested in making Norristown a stronger, more unified community. And our final panelist is Judge Gregory Scott, who was sworn in as a magisterial district judge in the 38th Judicial District of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and became the first African-American district judge in Montgomery County, and at 28, the youngest sitting judge in Pennsylvania. He grew up in Norristown and has been active in his community since he was in the 6th grade. Judge Scott has also been active in the criminal justice system and has focused his attention on the areas of recidivism and equitable justice. He has served on various commissions and committees with the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. So thank you again to all of our panelists for joining us, and I will begin with the first question. So this first question I will direct to Nicole Phillips, and then the other panelists, you guys can follow up with your answers after she's finished. So question 1, how has the history of criminal law sentencing impacted mass incarceration of Black people, and what impact has this had on the Black family?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nia. And I want to thank you and your committee, Juanita, and all of those that put all of this together and got us together for this panel today, this very important topic. You know, I think it's a given. I think Tara gave us a good history of our criminal justice system and what it was formed for, to control slaves, us, right? And to keep us under the thumb of the oppressor. And so I think that is an undeniable history, and we've seen that how that continues to play out. Directing that not even fast forwarding, but our history, we know that the disproportionate amount of those individuals who've been incarcerated have been Black males. And what did that do? That directly impacted the Black family, taking our men and our fathers out of the family. What did that do? It left our women, moms and grandmoms and aunties, to have to raise the children alone, to figure out how to work outside the home and give inside the home, stretch those responsibilities. We know the stressors of that. We know the burdens of that. Of course, motherhood is a joy in all of that, but the burdens of having to carry all of that load. And then what we know after that, and I know this is going to tie into some of our questions later, is what did it do to our children who lost their fathers, who've lost their role models, who've lost their guides. Being the mother of 2 Black teenage sons, I get the need for a father figure, the father present. There are things that I can say to my sons and it sounds one way, but when their dad says it, it has a completely different impact. So what I would know what it would be if they did not have access to their father on a daily basis or as they need basis, or the only way they would see them would be behind bars. That has a traumatic effect on the children as well. So it is directly related, the incarceration of our men. And of course, we cannot forget that we have had Black women that have been incarcerated as well. So now you may have families where you've taken the mother and the father from the children. Now the children are part of the social service system, the youth and family system. Now that opens a whole can of a whole nother set of circumstances and situations. So there's definitely a direct correlation and impact. And then further, what does that do to us as a society? What does that do to us as a culture when we have these breakdowns in our family structure, and then breakdowns in our community when we don't have critical family members and members of our community present to be a part of the culture and a part of our communities. So it's directly a trickle-down effect indeed.
Thanks, Nicole. Chief Talbott, would you like to follow up with a response?
I think she pretty much covered all the important areas. I would just like to add, I think it's important to consider the scale and the scope of the problem. So the United States has about 700 prisoners per 100,000 people. And if you want to put it in comparative terms, we are by far the largest country that imprisons more people than anybody else, both in terms of the number of people we're locking up and the number that we are locking up per capita. Putin's Russia locks up about 450 people per 100,000. And as I said, we're about 700 per 100,000. We have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. I think one of the big problems with the way that we deal with social problems through incarceration is there's an opportunity cost. You can't spend $80 billion a year on locking people up and then also put resources into those same communities. I think we had an opportunity a long time ago in the late 60s, early 70s, when crime started to be an issue in our cities. There was a question as to what are we going to do about it? Are we going to provide resources? Are we going to be compassionate? Are we going to fix the neighborhoods that are zoned in a way that creates chaos? And the answer to those questions was no. We're going to apply prison, police, parole, and probation. You know, that was our solution to suffering, is we're going to lock people up, and it clearly doesn't work. If it worked, we would be the safest country on the planet, right? Ironically, the efficacy of mass incarceration is undermined by the fact that it's not working. We're not the safest country on the planet. It's causing suffering above and beyond any problems that it's solving. It's also starting to become annoying when people, right? And here's my annoyance is the post George Floyd people. If it took somebody getting killed in front of your face to make you care about this problem, you're late to the party. It still feels like a sideshow. It still feels like a conversation that's had occasionally. You can still opt out of it. You can still hold positions like mine and not care, not know what you're doing, not have any sense of how your policies impact the number of people who are getting locked up. And there's really nobody holding the system and those that are leading in the system accountable for the suffering that is being created. So I think this all stages, we know that all stages of the criminal justice process land more heavily on dark-skinned people. It just does. And if you take just a second to look at any of the numbers around stops, searches, arrest, bail, sentencing, parole, the numbers are all horrendous. And the only way that you could not know is if you're not looking. That's the only way to not know. And if you do know and you're not doing anything about it, you don't care. And I think that is a biggest part of the problem. I'll close on, we've got to look for restorative solutions in the places where we've created suffering. Suffering comes out of the same neighborhoods over and over again. This problem is not something that is happening everywhere, and I think that's why we can often ignore it. It is happening in very defined spaces, and because we still live in a highly segregated country, we can choose to ignore what happens in some neighborhoods while we focus all resources on other neighborhoods, and it's just not a workable way to move forward.
Thanks, Chief Talbott. Just Scott, would you like to answer?
Oh, Nia, thank you so much. Thank you to you and the committee and Commissioner Lawrence and the rest of our fine distinguished panel, all of whom I know, some more than others. But you know, I don't think much more can be said after the distinguished Honorable Nicole Phillips and Chief Talbott have spoken. But I will say just a couple things, just to put a pin that has surfaced for me while listening to them speak about this. You know, the chief is absolutely 1,000% correct in that we incarcerate more people here than any of the other, than Western Europe, anywhere else in the world. We have, I think it's 1 in 4 are incarcerated, which is ungodly. but or 1 out of every 100 adults. I would say that I think that one of the things that really is for me that is crucial to note is that this system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And I think that that is what the history that we heard was a reminder of, right? When you have a certain group of people in a room designing a system that doesn't include the people that it is affecting are not included in that room, that it is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So you look at not only just the criminal justice system, but something that really impacts the criminal justice system is education, right? Education and equity. The education system in Pennsylvania is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is benefiting those that don't look like me, and it is creating people that look like me into it is not giving them the same opportunities, if you will, because it wasn't designed to operate in a way that elevates voices like mine. So I look at that, and we can apply that to anything. Look at the health disparities, right? I mean, I volunteer with the Black Doctors Consortium. You can look at what is happening right now, even during the coronavirus pandemic, access to vaccines, access to testing. This is no different than in the criminal justice process. And I think that it is cyclical. I think that it is massive. I think that it's not something that one person or one entity can necessarily fix. But I do think that I'm happy that we're having these conversations. I think that we've got to have these conversations in the right place with people that make decisions. One of the things that got me up out of my seat is when the commissioner talked about the power that he has. And sometimes we have people, and we have to think outside of the box with respect to the power that we have, right? Sometimes we get a job description. I see the treasurer is on here. I see the prothonotary is on here. We get a job description. We want to operate in that zone. And sometimes 21st century day problems require 21st century thinking, right? And we got to think outside of the box. And the commissioner duly noted that although he can't arrest someone, he certainly controls the budget, right? So if I'm not doing if I'm not meeting the standards, he can certainly affect how many paper clips I have or how many staff I have. And that's a powerful thing. The power of the purse is a powerful thing. So I think that all of these problems, although they are massive, although they are intertwined, and although they are passed down from generations, they can be fixed. We've got to think outside of the box, and we've got to allow, we've got to make sure that we put the right people in the right positions. And I think with that, I'll stop.
Thank you, Judge Scott. Heather Lewis, any last remarks you'd like to add to that question?
Certainly. And I apologize. I'm going to update my bio real quick for you. I'm no longer the Director of Resource Development, but I am the Executive Director of the first and only bail fund here in Montgomery County that supports the region outside of Philadelphia. There are 2 bail funds in Philadelphia, but there is none like it here in Montgomery County. So we are the first resource for folks that are facing pretrial incarceration as an opportunity to fight their case from home. With that being said, I'm going to try not to muddy all of the questions together because they're all connected. Like, you can't be incarcerated and not have trauma. You can't be incarcerated and there not be racial disparities. But there are 2 things that I just wanted to point out, and I'll keep it really quick, is that the war on drugs was a huge disparity that kind of further villainized and criminalized Black and brown folks. And then the private prisons that just kind of highlights the progression of Black and brown bodies being a commodity, something that is to be made money off of at the trauma and the tearing apart of Black families. I thank Tara for her comments and bringing out all those statistics. I know that's not an easy task to digest and have to speak about. We speak about this. I do this every day. We're having these conversations, and the conversation never gets easier. I'm constantly, traumatized might be a strong word, but it constantly stirs something in me every time we have these conversations about the disparities and, what seems so simple becomes so complex when you introduce willful ignorance. And that is my term for 2021, or leaving 2020 into 2021, is that there's been such a display of willful ignorance about what's actually happening, that it's really making it challenging to be able to move forward and get to those places where we can find healing and the restorative justice and all of those things to heal families and heal communities. So I'm thankful for this, the conversation. Thankful for everybody that's here, present and willing to have those conversations, and continue to look forward to having more difficult and challenging conversations in the future.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lewis. And you actually just mentioned trauma in the criminal justice system, which is perfect because that kind of leads into our next question, which you can feel free to answer first. What role does trauma play in one's involvement in the criminal justice system?
Aside from the obvious of, the trauma of being incarcerated, jail is not a nice place to be. So people are traumatized on the inside, families are traumatized on the outside. But one trauma that and I think maybe we're just now starting to recognize, since we're talking about, the disparities, or we'll be talking about disparities, but just in the recent, events of the last couple of months, the insurgents on our nation's capital, there were a lot of conversations and comments about, if that were Black folks, there'd be bodies all in the street, and that is a real thing. People don't want to acknowledge that if that happened, and if it was, that crime was committed by anyone else, they surely wouldn't be getting organic food in prison. They wouldn't be out on bail, because these are felony crimes, stealing from the White House, being on, government grounds with a firearm, like all of these things, murder. No one has been charged with the murder of the 5 people or 6 people that died that day. So these are the things. So the trauma that we, as, Black folks, and I'm sure white folks, were traumatized as well by seeing that, but Black folks were all like, they just had this expression, like, I'm not going to say it, but that's traumatizing, to see something on that level. And Chief Talbott said it, accountability. Like, where is the level of accountability for those hundreds of thousands of people that were there that day, or not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people that were there that day that committed crimes against our country? And Black folks are sitting here looking like, okay, when's somebody going to get arrested? When's somebody going to be charged? I mean, folks are out on bail. The young man that murdered 2 protesters, back in the summertime, he violated, first of all, you're underage. He violated his bail by drinking with Proud Boys, and they just gave him a slap on the wrist. They didn't revoke his bail. They just added some more conditions. Don't go outside. Don't talk to these people. And, we'll see your day in court. That's traumatizing. I'll end on that.
Thanks, Councilwoman Lewis. Nicole, would you like to follow up with a response?
Well, unless something has changed, I'll just build off of what Heather says. Now we can't even find him, right? He's skip bail, if you will, and he can't be found. So, just going off of that point. But when I read this question, I just thought of trauma all around the system. In my work, I dealt with, of course, traumatized victims, right? Who dealt with the trauma of having been victimized, the trauma of having to go through the court system, to have to think about talking about what happened to them before strangers, the trauma of dealing with a court system that they don't even understand, and trying to walk them through that. But also in my role, both as a local prosecutor and federal prosecutor, I've had spent a lot of time with hundreds of defendants. And we've actually talked about their trauma, and we've talked about their traumatized lives of poverty, of lack of resources, of growing up and only seeing violence and seeing their best friend murdered and their cousins murdered, and all those things that even built up till they got to this particular place. I don't think I've talked to anyone that was charged with a crime who doesn't have trauma. that has contributed to where they are, and having to help them, just listen to them, and even feeling maybe somewhat traumatized by talking to me, being viewed as an extension of the system that they've been dealing with for all of these years. Because of course, by the time I'm talking to them, it's not their first incident with the government, with the police, listening, taking it all in about all the things that they have encountered growing up in neighborhoods, being policed and over policed, and constantly being trailed, and constantly being stopped and searched, and all of those things, and going through all of those things, the trauma of having dealt with being racially profiled, DWB, driving while Black. All of these things are traumatizing. I can even speak from the place of having been stopped and racially profiled myself. That was traumatizing, especially when I had a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old in the back seat, and not knowing, on a highway in the South, not knowing what was going to happen. All of those things are trauma, and all of those things exist. Again, being a child with your parent in the system, your parent incarcerated, that's trauma. And so I think we can't even talk about the system without using the word trauma in all those various aspects. And we have to continue to think about that as those of us who have chosen careers inside the system. We have to be trauma informed in how we approach the system from whatever space that we're in, so that whatever reason we find ourselves being a part of the process, that we make sure that we're not further traumatizing, that we're not continuing to contribute to all of that. So I would say it's all across the system.
Thank you, Nicole. Judge Scott, would you like to answer the question as well?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the segue is amazing. So I have a trauma-informed approach in my courtroom that I use now. And it's something that now we have a statewide training. All magisterial district judges in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have trauma-informed training at our annual CLE. Something changed for me a few years ago when I was working, and it seemed simple, but it wasn't as simple. The words matter, right? And so going from why in the heck did you do that, to a person that has come before me, to what happened to you that allowed you to make that decision, right? Those are two separate questions that require two different responses, or that will get two different responses. So the response to what happened to you that led you up to this decision allows me to then cut at the core of the problem, which will allow me to ensure with a high probability that this person won't come back. Let me give you an example. I was just on call on Monday for Montgomery County. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in Montgomery County, there's a judge on call, there's a DA on call, there's a common pleas judge on call 24/7. And I had this guy, the prison sent me a request for an arraignment, and it was a retail theft charge, a simple retail misdemeanor theft, one charge. And I'm like, the technology wasn't working. We're in this Zoom world, right? So I'm at the courtroom. The technology's not working. I'm like, this is crazy. Why am I even seeing him anyway? Just summons him. We'll get to him another day. Like, this isn't that big of a deal. He stole a couple things from Home Depot. Then the technology began to work, and the prison called me back, and it's 11 o'clock, and I'm about to leave the office, and they're like, hey, will you please see this guy? So I get this guy, and I talk to him, and I'm like, I'm going through the perfunctory experience of arraigning him, when I get a little bit of his backstory. And I'm like, well, if I were to let you go tonight, sir, where would you go? And he said, oh, I would go to so-and-so's house. And I said, well, where does so-and-so live? And he said, well, he lives next door to my mom. So, okay, mom. So why won't you go to mom's house? Where's mom? Talk to mom. To make an incredibly long story short, a year ago tomorrow, so Thursday, his brother died of a heroin overdose. His father died years prior, and both of his grandparents died on his mom's side, all of drug overdoses, right? his mom, I get mom on the phone and I say, hey, mom, talking to son says that he could stay at the guy house next door. He can't stay at your place because your place is too small and won't allow for him to stay. He's like, well, it's not that my place won't allow him. I just won't have drugs. And she said, Judge, you know, I thought you were the coroner. I had a dream a couple nights ago that I was going to bury both of my sons on the same day due to drugs. And I thought when I saw Montgomery County on my caller ID, I thought that you were the coroner telling me that my dream has come true. And I say all that to say that when I look at cases that come before me now, I generally start with the premise that almost everybody that comes in from me has a parent that did not envision their child to become up to be a drug addict or a murderer or a rapist. That the person started off with good intentions, but somehow along the way didn't have sufficient margin in his life or her life that allowed him to make the decisions that he made. But then also that the crime that that person's being charged with is a symptom of a broader disease that that person has. And how do I treat that disease? And how do I put safeguards in place to allow that person to get the appropriate care that they need? Because we already know who's going to come in front. We could just look at the stats, right? Chief Talbott's really good at the data. His cops drive on data. We know the data. I can tell you, you know, by walking down the street, you know, are you a Black man? Are you under the age of 40? What school district did you come from? What zip code did you live in? If you have substance abuse, mental health issues, where you're going to end up. We build prisons off of third grade scores, right? So we know, how do we now that we have this information, how do we switch the system? How do we make sure that we're not putting people in the Montgomery County Correctional Facility for substance and mental health issues because our mental health hospitals are too full and we don't have enough beds at Montgomery County Emergency Services, or Eagleville is too full, or I only have one Alana Hook in the public defender's office and she can't buy all, but even though she's a great person and she has all this willpower, she cannot be the social worker for all 50,000 defendants that come through Montgomery County, even if she works 12 hours a day like she does 7 days a week. So now that we know that, are we going to really allow the commissioner, like he said, let's invest some funds in making sure propping up our mental health services, our mental health institutions, where the wraparound services. There's a lot of people walking the streets that should be in mental health institutions or have some type of wraparound services, and these agencies are getting money for them and no one's monitoring them. So at 12 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning, when they're trying to find out why is so-and-so outside on DeKalb and Marshall Street at 1:30 in the morning with no shoes and no hat, well, who's the person getting paid to monitor that person? But now we've got to arrest them for disorderly conduct because they're drunk or whatever the case may be, because no one's monitoring them. How are we making sure that these social services apparatus are being held accountable, that we have enough resources in them, that these people are being treated with dignity and the respect that they deserve? And I think I'm going on way too much my time period. I'm sorry, Nia.
Thanks, Judge Scott. So we're going to move on to the third question, and I will first direct this to Chief Talbott. What, if anything, can be done to eradicate racial disparities and inequalities that exist in the criminal justice system, and by whom?
Well, I think we have to choose collectively not to look away at this moment, that there does seem to be a different kind of momentum that has occurred throughout the pandemic and post George Floyd. Even though I was critical earlier, I do appreciate the people who have decided to come out and start to engage around these issues. I think that there needs to be an enhanced approach to accountability. I am absolutely all about the numbers, right? Because you have two options when it comes to showing that you care. You can drive an organization on stories, or you can use the data. And if you use the data, everybody counts equally, right? When you use numbers, everybody counts the same. And part of the problem that brought us here is that everybody has never counted the same. And some people are weighted much more heavily than others. So it's going to require, let's look at the numbers and let's not look away, and let's talk about them. It is very ironic to me that racially conscious policies got us into this mess, but nobody wants to talk about race getting us out of this mess, right? We want it to be race neutral now that we're trying to fix it. Well, it wasn't race neutral to get us here. So that's not the path out. So we're going to have to develop a language around justice that is open to a conversation that we used to have in the other direction freely and fervently, right? A lot of motivation behind dealing with these racial issues until the question becomes, okay, how can we fix it? I think that we have to look and see, the criminal justice system is, it is stupid, right? So if you went to the doctor and you had a boil on your foot and the doctor said, I'm going to amputate, you would get another doctor. You'd look at the doctor like, doctor is crazy. But we bring punishment in the face of trauma over and over again, and we're willing to lock people up for years and years, and we say that's a good idea. It's not a good idea. It doesn't work, and it has never worked. And if we're going to get ourselves out of it, we have to take a different standpoint. We've got to decide, the people that don't know what they're talking about, and there's still a couple of them out there, the people that don't know what they're talking about, we've got to say it, right? We're all friendly, we're all friends here. And I think part of the challenge is to look at different positions and listen to what people actually say. I can't wait to get invited to a panel like this and run into somebody who completely disagrees, clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. Nobody like that ever gets invited, right? When you come to a panel like this, you're going to hear a theme. I wouldn't get invited back if I start talking crazy. I'm pretty convinced. But we know who those people are. And I think it's important that we recognize they don't know what they're talking about. We've got to move past them, and we've got to create a different standard of performance to make this happen.
Thank you, Chief Talbott. Next, I'll direct the question to Nicole.
The same question. I think if
Yes,
we're going
yes,
to,
same question.
right, if we're going to make a difference, it's going to take a collective, collaborative response, meaning we have to vote. Just like we showed up in the presidential election, we have to show up for every election, because politics is local. You're not going to, it's much more likely that you're going to need or be in front of a government office here than at the White House, at the Capitol, or at the US Supreme Court. And we should do exactly what we did in November, but we should use that same energy for our local elections and elect the leaders that are going to do the things that we're talking about, that are committed to the things that we're talking about. Our voice and our vote does matter. When you get a jury summons, go serve in a jury. Every time I talk to a group, I say this, because we want to get out of it. It's inconvenient. We don't want to deal with it. But again, everyone is not called to be a lawyer or a judge or the chief of police. But if you have an opportunity to be a voice on a jury and be an arbiter of that justice, be involved. Then we need to make sure that, again, we're talking about our legislators. If we want laws to change, again, who changes laws? Our lawmakers. So we need to use the vote. But we also, if we have an urging to be that lawmaker, get involved. And all of that works with our grassroots organizations and the work that we're doing. We need all of it. None of it works exclusively. It all works together. And it has to be a collective effort. And we have to get on the same page. Sometimes we self-sabotage because we focus on our differences, but if we have some core common goals that if we focus on those and use that as the building block and the focal point, we can continue to make the changes. I believe that changes have been made. There's plenty more that need to be made, but we've got to come together. And we've got to use all those tentacles on the octopus, if you will, to make it all work and to create the real change that we need.
Thank you, Nicole. Councilwoman Lewis.
Yes, I just want to build on what Nicole said with collective and what Chief said about accountability and showing up for jury duty, going with your loved ones when they have a court case. That will change the outcome of that case. The system is designed for folks to be there in isolation, to feel shame and in secrecy, and just they don't want anybody to know. And then you are there left to be judged, tried, convicted, sentenced, the entire thing by yourself. No one looking, nobody saying, hey, that's wrong, or hey, you could have done this, or hey, your attorney should have done X, Y, and Z. You know, unless you're an attorney, chief of police, or, you know, involved in the criminal justice system in one way or another as an employment. But regular folks, they don't want to go anywhere near the criminal justice system because they might just get caught up. You know what I mean? It's one of those places that you just get trapped, even though you're not the one facing the charges. That's how taboo it is. And so we encourage, even with the pandemic, for anyone to reach out and attend hearings as often as possible. It holds the judges accountable. It holds the DAs accountable. It holds the defense attorneys, including our public defenders, accountable. When you know more, you can expect more out of the people that are there to be doing their job. Not to say that you have to be an attorney. There are groups like ours and, you know, across the nation that have this knowledge and experience that are willing to support and empower families to fight their cases. That's why the bail fund is bringing people home from incarceration, because you get a better outcome. And it's not that, you know, we're getting criminals off. You know, 70% of the folks that the Philadelphia bail fund has granted freedom to, their cases were dropped or dismissed. So that means innocent people were sitting in jail for no reason at all, just because they were charged, they weren't convicted. And so it's really, really important to hold all of those system actors accountable just simply by your presence. You don't have to know anything. You don't have to say anything. The fact that you're there changes the whole power dynamic.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lewis. And Judge Scott, if you'd like to answer the question.
Yeah, so just really quickly, I think they've said everything. Voting is incredibly important. These local elections matter. Right now we have, matter of fact, I'm up for re-election for Magistrate District Judge in Norristown. And, you know, the choices that people make for these elections are so important. And when you need them, it's so late in the process to change them out. So I have a job for 6 years. Nicole is running for the Court of Common Pleas. If elected, Nicole will have that job for 10 years. This isn't, you know, this isn't a city council race for 4 years or a state rep for 2 years. She's got that job for 10 years. So if the voters of Montgomery County don't do a deeper dive into who they can choose to take that seat, and they just vote, you know, willy-nilly on it, they may have buyer's remorse. And by the time they have buyer's remorse, there may not be much they can do about it, because she'll have it for 10 years and then she won't be able to really go away, because we don't have a history of getting rid of judges in retention. Now, I happen to think Nicole's an awesome person, and I think that she'd make it a great addition to the bench. My point, though, is that we've got to make sure that we are mindful when these elections come up, that you have a bench that's reflective of the people it represents and reflects your values. Another way that people can get involved, ordinary citizens, is voting jury duty. I always tell them that. But then raise your kids. You know, where are your kids? How's your house doing? How is your house running? Take care of your house, right? And then if you have more time after that, look up some organizations that are already in this work. If this is the work you want, for example, criminal justice, there's this project called the Marshall Project. You can look at that. Maybe criminal justice isn't your thing, but healthcare is. What is an organization that is dispelling or correcting these healthcare disparities, or education? I mean, there are so many educational organizations out here right now, and all of those things tie back into criminal justice. So after you've done all of those things that I said, voting jury duty and taking care of your house, if you have an organization that you want to get affiliated with, that would be great. or starting your own thing. But all of those things are incredibly important. And I'll help you segue to your next question, and that is with respect to the societal and systemic factors that are affecting the Black community. Every day that I come to work, I see the manifestation of not having the Black man in his rightful place in his family and in his community. I see it because 94% of the people that are coming before me are African American, and they come from broken homes. They come from, I shouldn't say broken homes. They come from homes that with a single parent. When we talk about education, they have they're not generally not able to complete their education. They lack critical thinking skills. They may have a diploma, but the diploma, because of their critical thinking, and they may have an IEP, all these types of things. We can navigate all of that, but all of these things play a role. And I'm a fundamental believer that if you restore the man back in his rightful place in his family and in society, I think that does correct a lot of things. But with that being said, that leaves a whole lot of people that are already out. So how do we handle that as well? And I think it's a very complex thing. But I do believe that family plays a big role. And what I tell a lot of my dads that come in front of me is that to be an all-star dad does not mean that you got to go to the aquarium. I went to take my niece and nephew to the aquarium right before the pandemic, and oh my God, I was like, whoa, I'm a public figure. I'm on this public figure salary. I can't afford the aquarium for my niece and nephew. But creating memories by going to the park, going to the grocery market and having conversations about different products and why you're choosing those. Those are the memories that are priceless. They cost you nothing but your time and spending time with those people. And when your daughter hears the tone and tenor of your voice when you say, I love you, or when you grip her up and you hug her, right? She's going to remember when some young guy comes up, and right now the CDC is saying people are losing not that this is this conversation, but they're losing virginity between 12 and 14. When that guy comes up and offers her a movie ticket or a piece of jewelry, she's going to know, no, I didn't hear it. I didn't feel the I love you the way that my dad says I love you, right? So taking care of your house and raising your kids, I think that plays a huge role in some of these disparities. And I think that the family structures are important. And I'm navigating it myself. So those are my comments on that.
Thank you, Judge Scott. You kind of segue into our last question before we take some questions from the chat. So this question is a two-parter. What societal/systemic factors have affected the structure of the Black family, and what gives you hope about the future of the Black family? Chief Talbott, would you like to start with your answer?
Yes, I'll focus on the hope, because I think it's important for everybody who works in the public sector, everybody dealing with these issues. What gives hope is making a choice to be hopeful. I think the opposite of hope is cynicism. And in government, if you work in the public sector, cynicism is corruption. Cynicism requires zero courage. It provides comfort for our failures. It destroys our drive and our creativity. Cynicism is fear systematically applied to our work. Hope is a professional responsibility when you're in this business. It does often seem bleak, and it is hard every single day. And it has never gotten any easier. And it probably won't get any easier anytime soon, because I've chosen the hardest problems in society. But I think it's important for anybody who works in this business. If you listen to somebody who works in the public sector and they say, this is terrible and it's not going to get any better, you need to run in the other direction. It requires men and women that are hopeful. It requires a degree of optimism. It requires focusing on positive outcomes. It requires the ability to look at hard problems and maintain your sense of drive in the face of that adversity. Hope is the thing that is often missing when we've decided that what's here now should be this way. It will always be this way. We've got to make another choice. And we have to make that choice in the absence of any evidence supporting that decision. We have to do it just to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Talbott. Nicole?
I mean, I don't know that I could say it any better than what Chief Talbott said, but I will say that just right here gives me hope, The fact that we have all these folks on this Zoom right now and all the folks on Facebook Live shows me that we have people that care, that want change, that want to go forward. We have the history that we have, and we can't rewrite that history, unfortunately. What we can do is write the future, and we can write our story the way we want it to be. And so it takes all of us. And I'm encouraged by the collective efforts that I see. I'm encouraged by the marches, but I'm also encouraged by the leadership shifting, excuse me, that I see. And I see the voices, I see our young people. I realize as I reject getting older in one sense, I love to see the young people that are coming behind me, who are brave, who are bold, who are saying the truths that we've been too politically correct to say sometimes. And we're moving forward. And so all of that gives me hope. All of it gives me hope that we are going to do better, that my boys are going to have a better experience as men than their predecessors. As long as we continue to not lose hope, and we continue that we not get discouraged, and we continue collectively all across our differences, find that, keep the common goal. One of my friend's moms used to say, keep the main thing the main thing. And I think we know what that main thing is right now. And if we can keep focused on that, we will write a different story for our future.
Thank you, Nicole. Councilwoman Lewis.
Yes, I'm gonna keep with the hope theme because, you know, I think that's the challenge with a lot of folks that are you know, have been traumatized, is that they lose hope. And so that they start, you know, just down this path that there's no hope at the end of their journey. So restoring hope into people, restoring hope into our children. And I am hopeful, just like Nicole said, young people are coming behind us, taking up arms and you know, engaging in this fight, so to speak, and for change. And so when we say Black Lives Matter, we say it because we've been injured and we've been traumatized, and we have to take special care for that particular group at that particular time. So when you see what we got coming up, you know, in some of the young people, that we're having a Black therapy bonfire, that's an event for Black folks to come together and talk about their trauma and talk about pathways to healing. You know, we have a restorative justice practitioner and a healing circle, I guess, facilitator in our own Norristown Police Department's chaplain, Yvonne Platts. So we're actively engaging. Then when people say there's nothing here in Norristown, that's not true. It might not be what it used to be, but we have an opportunity to, like Nicole said, to pick up from where we are today, take these things that we have already in place, build and put our resources into it. And so those things can grow and flourish, and that become what people are saying, oh, that's going on in Norristown, that's going on in Norristown, not just Norristown, but Montgomery County as a whole. Anywhere that our lives touch somebody else, when we have hope and we care about people, then, you know, I think we can have a better outcome in relationships and understanding and communication about race relations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lewis. I want to use this time to allow attendees to put any questions in the chat that they might have for all of the panelists, for a specific panelist. I'm checking the chat to make sure I haven't missed any questions. I don't think I have, but if any attendee has a question, you guys can enter it in the chat. Okay. Doesn't look like any are coming in. But I just wanted to take this time again to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you guys for taking an hour and 15 minutes out of your day to participate in our program. Oh, some questions are coming in. This one is specifically for Chief Talbott. What is being done to reduce racial profiling in Norristown?
So there are some things in policing that will predictably lead to racial profiling. If policing is organized around stopping and questioning and searching as many people as possible to prevent and solve crimes, you're going to have racial profiling as a byproduct of that. The way that you eliminate, or I shouldn't say eliminate, the way that you reduce racial profiling is that you be certain that you have a policing strategy that involves using the lightest touch possible when you're policing a community. If the approach that you are using feels heavy-handed to members of the community, you're engaged in the wrong approach. You have to be an organization that's open to feedback, connected to the community in real ways. There are lots of people, trust me, anytime something bad happens, it ends up on, the Facebook and the Twitter and the Instagram. There are a number of people that are going to contact me relatively immediately if that happens. I say that to say an organization that's has deep inroads into the social fabric of the community will course correct as a matter of the way that it does business, because you are open to that sort of feedback. You also have to make sure that your approach to policing doesn't inadvertently, I'll say, cause police officers to believe they are better if they stop and ticket and arrest more people. You get no prizes for that in the Norristown Police Department. Nobody gets positive feedback for the number of stops that they make or the number of arrests. It is much more likely that you make an arrest or you engage in some coercive activity and somebody of rank asked you, why did you do that? Or why did you do it that way? The last I'll say is the nervous system of the organization has to be sensitive to how it treats the public. One of the problems that has come up over and over again with policing is it was never about justice and fairness, right? And other panels have talked about the origins of policing. Policing didn't originate as a mechanism to achieve justice. That wasn't what it was all about. We know what it was all about. And there's never been a course correction. There's never been a reconciliation. There's never even been a real conversation. We study it over and over again with different commissions, and we come back to the same place. There are problems. It is from the origin. So you have to acknowledge it, and you have to affirmatively drive behaviors into the organization that isn't necessarily a part of the DNA of the police. So that's a snapshot of what we do.
Thank you, Chief Talbott. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'll take one more question from the chat. This one's for Councilwoman Lewis. Where can bail fund donations be sent to help?
I put it in the chat, but our website is bailfundmonco.org. And also we are in the process of fundraising for our Reuniting Families bailout for Valentine's Day, hence the hearts on my shirt. So yeah, we have Venmo, Cash App, or you can mail a check, reach out to me. We can get you those details. But thus far, we've spent about $30,000 bailing out 12 of our Montgomery County community members.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lewis. Thank you again, everyone. We've reached the end of our program. Like I said, thanks you for taking time out of your day to join us and learn about this week's topic. Thank you again to our panelists and community or county leaders. I also want to thank the committee. I've been a part of this committee for 3 years, and it's probably one of the favorite parts of my job, and I look forward to the program every year. If you guys are able to, make sure you can join us for next week's program, which is Wednesday at the same time, 12 to 1:15. And next week's topic is parenting and family. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.